back to 5 Acres Honey Farm. I'm Tara Lynn, and I've recently shared in a few videos that we are getting some new livestock. And as you can tell by the title of this video, we are getting some pigs. And this particular breed of pig is the Idaho Pasture Pig. And there are, as I've mentioned before, there are so many videos about this particular breed. And I'm not going to go into all the details about the breed, but with what I'll be explaining, you'll kind of learn a little bit about this particular line of pigs, just because of what is attracting me to bring them to our little hobby farm. So the Idaho Pasture Pig, based on what I understand about the differences with all the different types of pig breeds, and of course I have not studied all of them, but typically pigs are known for rooting and for doing some fairly destructive damage. Depending on what type of landscape you have, that could influence like what type of pig breed that you'd like to get. And I have kind of the fortunate position of having a fairly good mix of landscape that would be favorable for a pig. And we have a mix of, I would say, quote unquote grass. So I have a separate video that I'll link to where I'm doing a little experiment with some seeds to see what the best planting method will be for establishing some extra forage that may be more nutritious for the pigs. Right now, it's just whatever's been growing here. We've never seeded any grass, so we are the second owners of the property. And actually, I shouldn't say that, just considering indigenous peoples and things. But we are the second owners of this particular house. I'm not sure who owned the land prior to the folks who own this house before us. But since then, in the last 9 years, we haven't done any type of lawn or grass seeding. I have a separate video about the crimson clover that I seed every fall. So other than that, and maybe throwing some buckwheat around during the warmer months, we don't really do anything to manage the lawns in any way. With that said, there is a ton of cleavers, chickweed, some weeds I don't even know the name of, and then some other grasses that I imagine the previous owners of this house had seeded, and they had left a bag of seed in the shed that mice got into, and I believe it was a fescue blend. And we recently discarded that. I feel like it was coated in fertilizers and chemicals and things, so it wasn't anything that I wanted to use. So with all of that, there is plenty of space for us to rotate them around. And from my research, the pigs could probably do well in like a 30 by 30 area for maybe a week or so. And depending on, the time of the season, maybe for just a few days, maybe for a little bit longer. We'll just kind of have to gauge it. So I'm going to be setting up mobile fencing. And so I like the idea that we could grow a lot of the forage. This particular breed, only 10% of their diet comes from grain. So it's kind of nice that they can just show up and there's already food for them here and there's not much I need to do. I also like that by moving them around, they're going to help, take care of, we've got a lot of grubs and things in the area. And from what I've heard from folks is that like when you have an abundance of grubs, you have an abundance of moles and voles. And we certainly have that. And they've caused some other issues, not only in the garden, but with some like pathways and things and some destruction there. So I'm hoping maybe as a side effect of the pigs eating the grubs that the moles won't have anything desirable to eat here and they'll go to someone else's property where there's plenty of grubs. But we'll see. But with that, the pigs will also eat invasives. So we have a tremendous amount of autumn olive here, poison ivy, which is kind of creeping into certain spaces where I don't really want it. Before it was kind of nicely contained to a little corner we didn't really visit, but I'm noticing it pop up in more places. So this will be a nice way to get that cut back. And the other thing that I liked is that we have a really great population of hickory nut trees here and oak. So the pigs will enjoy hickory nuts and acorns in the fall. And we have a lot of a mixture of wooded space and open in the sun space. So it will be very convenient to set up paddocks where they have access to both the shaded area, so they have some relief in the summer, and still have, you know, the space to just lounge and nap in the sun, and have the grass and the weeds and everything to eat. The other nice thing is we do have a seasonal creek that runs through the property, pretty much like right down the center. And although in like the peak of summer when it's kind of hot and dry, it's dry as well. And like this time of year, unfortunately, the pigs are not yet born, would be like a great time because the water is just constantly flowing, and after a good rain, it actually kind of gets a little rapid down there. I'll be able to set up their paddocks in a way that they will have access to like having a natural wallow without having to, hopefully that will like deter them from turning their water for drinking, their drinking water, into that kind of a space, is what I hear is typically their behavior. The other thing that I really liked is that as you know, as we'll get this all set up, like I mentioned, I'll be rotating them, so the fencing situation is something really manageable by just me, so I don't need to rely on my husband or hiring someone, or a tremendous expense in some permanent fencing. So this will be a nice temporary setup that I can manage independently, and will be less expensive than permanent fencing. The other nice thing is that since they are seasonally here, and that will probably be about an 8 to 10 month grow out, that we'll get through the summer, get through the fall. We'll have to provide some supplemental hay in the winter for them. And then, you know, early next spring, they'll be sent to the processor. So it will be, I feel like, a nice kind of experiment in having pigs, but that we, you know, it won't be like this constant thing. So if it is a bit of a challenge, there'll at least be a light at the end of the tunnel lined with bacon, but you know, just like having that available. It's not going to be as daunting as committing to an animal that you're going to have for a really long time. And so those are the things that have attracted me to this particular breed of pig. The other thing that attracted me to this, I mean, other than all of those things just fitting really well to our landscape and to our lifestyle, is that apparently the quality of the meat is supposed to be really great too. So I can't really comment on that. I've not personally tried it, but I'm very curious to. And just as a avid gardener, and from growing our own meat with our quail, I feel like everything that we produce here tastes just like it should taste, and you really don't realize it till you have it. So I have a feeling that that growing out these pigs is going to be the same thing. So also, just a quick note before I sign off, the other thing that was attractive in the lines of cost is that the two pigs that I've reserved, I won't pay for them till you know, after they're born, so there's no deposit needed. But the farm is charging $200 per barrow. So I'm getting 2 barrows, so that's 2 castrated male pigs. That I feel like is not, you know, it's not a number that's going to be like preventative from acquiring the pigs. And then in thinking of course, like their food cost over you know, 8 to 10 months, any additional fencing material that I may need that I may not have already. I do have, I would say, about 80 to 90% of what I need for the fencing. Just taking all that into account, that it's probably going to provide us with a few years worth of meat, that I feel like that knowing where our food comes from, knowing what we're putting into it, that all of that just feels really valuable to me personally. But, if cost is a factor, that just kind of helps give you an idea of the fees there. And I've seen other farms charge less. I think it also depends on like where you live and maybe the time of year. I've listened to a few podcasts about raising pigs, and typically it's suggested that you want to acquire your piglets early in the spring, maybe late winter, and then take that benefit of the growing season where they're going to have a lot of forage, and you can grow them out before the fall comes and before things get really cold, and where there's a lot of their forage might die back, and you won't have to deal with freezing water and things depending on where you live. I'm not too concerned about, now that, we are going to have them through the winter. So there's really, no flexibility there at this point. But I think it'll be a good learning experience so that if we do like this and we want to try this again, then we could potentially see if the farm we're sourcing them from would be having piglets over the winter, or if there's somewhere else we would source them from, and to try to time it that way. I particularly am looking forward to having them here through the winter. I really love the slowing down pace that winter brings after the beekeeping season and the garden season. And I feel like it'll be really nice to have a little bit more life around through the winter. So that's something that I think fits really well. We're also, it's, in the warmer time, like we're out and about a lot more. So I like that in the winter we're home more often, and so can keep an eye on them. We also don't have a tremendous amount of like freezing weather days where water would be freezing. And with the pigs, they'd have a fairly large water, so it would have to be very cold for a very long time for it to freeze. Those things don't really concern me as much. And there's also, different ways you can keep the water warm or running and moving and stuff to prevent the freezing. So like when we get there, we'll cross that bridge kind of thing. And actually, I know I just said before I was going to leave you with one last thing, and I just gave you two, but I actually just thought of a third one. So the other thing that I'm planning to do, and maybe this will be the last thing that I'll leave with you before closing this out, is that I'm not one of those folks who sets everything up with like automation when it comes to livestock. I don't use like the solar powered chicken coop door and have them, take care of themselves. I don't have a rain catchment system on the chicken coop and have it fill in and everything. I guess I could do those things, but I enjoy the process of checking in on all the animals and being involved with them. And we also have, like, just the chickens as an example, like we have their coop set up so that they have a completely enclosed run that is, knock on wood, predator proof. We haven't had any issues with it. I guess we've had the chickens now 8 years, because we got them a year after we bought the house. And so the way that they're set up, if I don't go out there, they're going to be fine for a day or two or three. But I do go out there every day, probably more than once or twice a day, just to check on them and collect eggs and all that stuff. So with the pigs, like pretty much all the information that I've read and watched and listened to has talked about feeding pigs twice a day. The farm where we're getting the piglets from, she said, with she and her and her husband working full time, they switched to feeding once a day, and they've actually seen better grow out rates by doing that. That's something, with hearing her favorability with it, that's something that I might just start with, since that's what they're going to be used to. And that way, if there are things that come up, they'll already be accustomed to having that once a day feeding schedule. But this is where I will try to incorporate some automation. If we do have some things coming up where we might have to go out of town, what I'm planning on doing, and I'm going to be ordering it soon, is ordering a deer feeder. So I hadn't really known about these, but then a previous owner had left their deer feeder in the woods, and they have it, they come like on like a tripod, or sometimes with like 4 legs, and they can stand and just drop corn and deer corn down so that it will attract the deer for hunting and things. This particular one was actually suspended in the tree with some rope or chains or something, and it had a digital timer on it so that it would drop the corn at certain times of the day. And I'm looking into acquiring one of those so that, one, yes, I could hang it in the woods. That way I don't need a stand, they don't have to knock it over, it'll be above them. And then the other is that I want to learn exactly how much it will drop. So I've got to figure out like the timing and making sure it's going to drop enough grain for both of the pigs. And they'll have to figure it out amongst themselves about who's getting what. And then make sure that it's set up to do a once a day drop. And of course, still have someone come to make sure it's operating well, that the batteries didn't die or there's a malfunction or anything like that, because that would not be very good. So, but in that way, I want to have that set up so it's one less thing I'll need to carry around. And since it is something that I can't skip out on, whereas the chickens, if I have a crazy day and I don't make it out there in a day, that's all right. But I want that same kind of peace of mind with the pigs as well, that yes, I will be checking on them every day, but I can also have the peace of mind knowing that their food will get dropped for them once a day and that they're going to have a huge water supply. So it'll mainly be just making sure they're looking good, that all those things are working well, and that their fencing is in place and that a tree hasn't fallen or compromised it in any way. Probably learned a little bit about the pig breed now just from what I'm sharing. And there are, it's simple to do a search and you can see some really in-depth videos about the breed that are probably a lot more hands-on, because a lot of those videos are actually with the pigs. So I obviously I'm just hanging out in my office and sharing a little bit about why we chose that breed, trying to document the process leading up to when they come here. So if you're kind of in the same situation, or if you're considering the breed, these are some things that maybe might influence your decision making, and maybe you're in the same place that I am and you're kind of like nesting and getting ready for all the pigs. So in that process, we just picked up a few cattle panels and also some pallets. So we'll be building their shelter, and then the cattle panels I'm just going to use as a temporary, more secure structure for them when they first arrive, so that they can get familiar with the space and more familiar with us. And after a few days or a week, then we'll open them up to the larger paddock area. If you missed my earlier video about the seed experiment, I am linking to that below so you can see the different places we're planning to rotate them through. Please, since this is our first foray into a larger livestock, leave your recommendations. I really, really would like them. And whether they're recommendations on what to do, what not to do, warnings, all of that, I would really love to hear it. So thank you.